In the thick, salt-laced summer of 1992, Daniel and Paige Whitmer set off on what should have been a dreamy, romantic rowing trip along the fog-slicked coast of Maine. They were newlyweds, just 13 days married, and still floating in that early haze of love, where even silence felt sacred. Locals at the harbor near Devil's Elbow watched them push off from the dock that July evening, nestled in a small aluminum skiff, the kind that clanked with every tug of the oars. A picnic cooler, a blanket, and two glowing faces disappeared into the mist. They never returned. 3 days later, the boat drifted back alone, ghost-like, its hull tapping gently against the rocky edge of Gull's Point. It was empty. No blood, no life jackets, just the soft echo of questions that no one could answer. For over 3 decades, the story faded into folklore, a tragic tale of two honeymooners swallowed by the sea. Until now. In August 2024, as construction crews began dredging Devil's Elbow for a long-delayed harbor expansion, a backhoe caught on something buried beneath layers of seaweed and thyme. What emerged wasn't just debris. It was a rusted, mesh-wrapped metal case, sealed inside a diver's pouch. And inside that, miraculously preserved, a disposable Kodak camera. The film was fragile, degraded by salt and time, but the last few frames developed clearly enough to freeze investigators in stunned silence. There were tide pool shots, half-eaten sandwiches, and candid laughs caught mid-motion. In one image, Paige leaned toward Daniel, wind whipping through her dark hair as he smiled behind his Red Sox cap. It was youthful, intimate, untouched by what came next. But the final photo changed everything. The last picture wasn't just Daniel and Paige. There were 4 people on that boat, 2 in the light, 2 in the shadows. The image was grainy, its corners still damp as it lay beneath fluorescent lab lights. Detective Marley Greer didn't speak as she stared at it, the corners of her eyes tightening. You didn't need to be a profiler to feel the weight pressing from that photo. It wasn't physical. It was the oppressive silence of 32 unanswered years, pressing down like fog that never lifted. In the foreground, Daniel and Paige radiated warmth. He had that cap tilted back just slightly, a streak of sunscreen across his nose. Her cheek rested on his shoulder, wedding ring catching a sliver of sunlight. They looked like they belonged in a magazine spread for summer love. But behind them, nestled in the shadows near the stern, subtle, barely visible, was a third presence, a hand. Not Daniel's, not Paige's, pale, bone-thin, with fingernails chewed to the quick and veins like fine blue wires under the skin. And just behind Daniel's head, deeper in the darkness, a second face emerged. Its expression was unreadable. It didn't smile. It didn't blink. It stared directly into the lens, eyes locked on the photographer, as if daring someone to notice. Marley's chest tightened. She had grown up in this town. Back when the Whitmers vanished, she was just a kid, riding her bike past the pharmacy where her mother worked part-time. She remembered the missing posters, the registry printouts taped to the counter. Paige's name had been on one. Back then, the mystery had felt enormous, like something that existed just outside the edge of the world she knew. Now it sat in front of her, haunting and tangible. "You're sure this hasn't been tampered with?" she asked without lifting her gaze from the photo. Nicole Heron, the forensic tech, nodded. "Positive. The camera's from 1991. Fun saver Kodak. Chemistry checks out. Timestamp lines up with the rental log. No evidence of digital manipulation. It's real. Every part of it." July 12th, 6:14 p.m. That timestamp stuck with Marley like a hook. It was 40 minutes before Tobin Maher, the dockhand who first raised questions, claimed he saw them rowing past the split in the rocks. He'd told officers back then that 2 people stood watching them from the dock. Not on the boat, just watching, still as statues. He couldn't describe their faces, just that they gave him a bad feeling. No follow-up, no names. Back then, it was dismissed as nerves or superstition. But the photo proved it wasn't just nerves. It was real. 4 people on that boat. Not 2, which meant Daniel and Paige didn't just vanish. They weren't swept away by tides. They were taken. And somewhere along that fogged coast, someone had kept a secret for over 30 years. Marley pulled the dusty case file from the archive box back at her office. Its pages yellowed, corners bent, and paper-clipped photos of the abandoned boat still tucked inside. The past had waited long enough. Now it was demanding to be seen again. Not as a ghost story, but as the truth. Paige's parents drove up from Massachusetts in a haze of disbelief, their faces tight with hope and desperation. Daniel's brother flew in from Minnesota, his voice cracking as he offered his statement to authorities. A week of exhaustive searching followed. Coast Guard sweeps, divers, helicopters. And then, nothing. Just a quiet service, closed caskets, and a silence that clung to their families like wet linen. Marley flipped through the old case timeline again. The rental receipt still held the ink of Daniel's signature, time-stamped at 5:37 p.m. The skiff's serial number was scrawled in red pen, DIX-4N27. The weather report for that day was unremarkable. Light winds, a low tide around 7:15 p.m., and the ever-present fog creeping in just before dusk. The boat had been recovered near Gull's Point 3 days later, bobbing gently like a forgotten toy. Both oars missing. Only one life jacket found, neatly tucked under the seat. Yet no alarms had truly been raised. The skiff was rinsed, patched, and quietly returned to the rental fleet. No crime, no case, just a couple presumed lost at sea. Back in her office, Marley stood before her whiteboard. At the top, she'd scrawled a single word in thick marker. Why? Why the secrecy? Why the cover-up? Why, after 32 years, was a photo suddenly turning the tide? Her eyes settled once again on Paige's laughing face, frozen in the photo. Daniel's arm was around her waist, his other hand still clutching the oar. Behind them, a third hand, slack, pale, and eerily at ease, rested gently on Paige's shoulder, as if it belonged there, as if whoever it was had always been part of the picture. And then there was that face, the one barely visible in the shadows, unflinching, watching the lens with a kind of quiet malice. Marley grabbed a pen and crossed out the last line on the official summary. Status, presumed drowned. She pressed down hard, dragging a thick black line through the words, and wrote 3 more. Case reopened, August 9th, 2024. Outside, the fog had returned, draping the harbor like a memory. The marina hadn't changed much since 1992. Marley's boots thudded softly against the warped planks of the dock. The rental shack still bore its flaking pale blue paint, and the same wind chimes clinked from the awning, tired and rusted, sounding like distant voices. A crooked boat rentals sign hung over a grime-streaked window. The current owner, Phil Mayer, a stout man in his 60s with oil-stained fingers and nicotine-yellowed teeth, met her at the entrance. He was Tobin Marr's nephew, the original dockhand who'd given the only eyewitness account. Tobin had died a decade earlier, but Phil, it turned out, had a habit of never throwing anything away. Behind the counter, he pried open a dented metal cabinet that groaned on its hinges. From it, he pulled a ledger wrapped in a paper towel so old it crumbled at the edges. Everything from 91 to 93, he grunted. My uncle was old school. Wrote it all by hand. Marley flipped open the ledger. The pages smelled of brine and machine oil. Ink faded in spots, but legible. Rows and rows of neatly logged rentals. On July 12, 1992, she found it. D. Whitmer, Boat 12. Serial number DEX-4N27. Signed out at 5:37 p.m. Return time, sunset. Her eyes tracked the row. The return column was blank. Instead, a red circle with a question mark. Phil explained, Uncle marked it that way when a boat didn't come back on time. Usually meant we had to go find it. Except this one, Marley murmured, flipping to the next page. July 13th. Boat 12. Logged as returned at 6:12 p.m. Marley's heart skipped. That was 2 days before Harbor Patrol officially found it. Her brow furrowed. Did someone else use it? Phil leaned over her shoulder. That ain't right. That boat didn't come back till the 15th. Patrol dragged it in. There was no signature, just the initials MT, written in shaky cursive. Under notes, returned late, needed rinse, extra jacket on board. A tremor rippled through Marley. Do you recognize those initials? Phil shook his head. That's not my uncle's handwriting. He always used block caps. This question mark, that's someone else entirely. Marley snapped a photo with her phone and scanned the rest of the log. No duplicates, no other anomalies. But someone unauthorized, had logged that boat back in before it was found and noted an extra life jacket no one ever accounted for. Back outside, the air smelled thick with seaweed and diesel, the same scent Marley remembered from childhood visits to the dock. She followed the curve of the pier to its end, pausing where the land split and opened into the open Atlantic. If Daniel and Paige had rowed straight north, they would have passed Gull's Point just before the tide shifted and the fog blanketed the harbor. That's what everyone had always believed. She returned to her office and laid out the evidence. The photograph, the journal entries, the rental log, the missing persons reports. Red thread stretched between them, forming a latticework of unanswered questions. 2 people left. 4 were in the boat. 1 life jacket returned. 1 false entry. Someone had gone to great lengths to bury this. She called the Knox County Archives and requested any old Harbor Patrol photos from the recovery. Most of the evidence from the early 90s was stored on microfilm. It would take days. In the meantime, she tracked down the deputy who filed the original report. He was retired now, living alone in Bar Harbor. She circled the address. That night, she sat in the dark with the photograph again. The shadows felt heavier now. The hand on Paige's shoulder seemed too casual. It wasn't the hand of a stranger. Whoever it belonged to felt entitled to be there. She turned the photo over. No caption, no date. Just the faint impression of a thumb pressed into the back like someone trying to hold it in place. That camera had survived 32 years in salt water. It had been wrapped, sealed, and hidden inside a rusted tin box. Not lost, hidden. Someone had taken that photo, and someone else had gone to great lengths to ensure it wouldn't be found. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. The part that disturbed her most wasn't the mystery. It was the silence. The kind of silence that grows only when too many people have a reason to stay quiet. The next morning, Marley knocked on a door in Bar Harbor. The man who answered looked older than his years, skin drawn tight against his skull, pale eyes squinting at the sun. Everett Clean, retired deputy. He lived in a narrow home filled with dusty books and forgotten memories. He let her in with a nod and sank into a cracked leather chair. "I'm here about the Whitmer case," Marley began gently. "You filed the recovery report back in '92. We found something, a photo, a disposable camera recovered near Devil's Elbow. Daniel and Paige are in the frame, but there are 2 others. It's not just a missing persons case anymore." Clean stared at her. His jaw clenched, his eyes haunted. "You saw them," he whispered. "You saw the others." Marley blinked. "You knew?" "No," he said. "I suspected, but no one wanted to go further, not in that town. Too many connections, too many secrets." He reached beside his chair and pulled out a thick sealed envelope. "You'll want to see this," he said quietly. And Marley, heart pounding, leaned forward into a 32-year-old secret finally beginning to breathe. Inside the envelope were photocopies of documents Marley had never seen in the official case file. There were close-up photographs of the skiff. Angles sharper, more intimate than anything included in the reports. A second page of the recovery report with handwritten notes scrawled in the margins. And tucked among them, a faded Polaroid of a waterlogged life jacket. Just inside the collar, stitched in thread nearly unraveled, was a name. M. Tenko. Matthew Tenko, Kline said, almost like the name still tasted bitter in his mouth. Marley shook her head. Never heard of him. He worked part-time at the marina that summer, Kline explained. No official record. Paid under the table. Lived in a trailer up by Finch Hollow. Quiet kid. Always watching. He paused, a frown pressing deeper lines into his face. When the boat came back, I was the one who checked it. That jacket was stuffed under the seat. His name was clear as day. I wrote it down, attached it to the file. Marley narrowed her eyes. It's not in the file now. Kline gave her a grim, humorless smile. Didn't think it would be. Her mind spun. The initials MT logged in the rental book the day after Daniel and Paige vanished. Someone had slipped that skiff back into the records as if nothing had happened. Someone who knew how to blend in. Someone like Tenko. What happened to him? She asked. Disappeared, Kline said flatly. 6 months after the Whitmers. Told a neighbor he was headed to New Hampshire to join a religious co-op. No forwarding address. I checked. No one by that name ever showed up. Marley flipped through the rest of the photos. One showed the boat from above, probably taken during recovery. The front seat was empty, but in the rear she saw it. The faint outline of a second cooler. The original report had stated they'd only brought one. You think they packed for more than 2 people, she murmured. Kline didn't respond. His expression said enough. Worn, haunted. Marley carefully gathered the pages and closed the folder. I want to find him, she said. If he came back, if he walked off that dock, I need to know why. Kline nodded. Start with the bait shack, he said. There was a guest ledger. People used to sign when they bought tackle or ice. If Tenko left a trace, it's probably in there. Back in her car, Marley switched on the recorder. Her voice was steady as she dictated. Tenko is the first tangible lead. Logged under MT in the ledger. Known to be at the marina. Life jacket recovered. Name stitched inside. Vanished without a trace. Possible accomplice. At the station, she updated the evidence board. She circled Tenko's name in red beneath the photo, linking it to the initials and the false return entry. The more she compared Kline's documents to the original file, the clearer it became. Someone had erased Tenko deliberately. The next morning, Marley stood before the old bait shack, now little more than a storage container overrun with weeds. With Phil Maher's reluctant blessing, she pried open the rusted door and stepped inside. Dust billowed in the sunlight. Rows of shelves sagged under buckets of rotted fishing line and old gas cans. Near the back, beneath a warped workbench, something caught her eye. A narrow red binder, labeled in faded Sharpie, Customers 1990 to 1993. Her pulse quickened. She pulled it out and flipped through the pages. July. Her fingers trembled as she found the dates. Between July 12th and 14th, 2 names appeared, scrawled in the same slanted, nervous handwriting. M. Tenko, C. Rhodes. Marley's breath caught. Rhodes. Daniel's middle name was Allen. Paige never changed her last name. This wasn't a misprint. It was another person entirely. She stared at the names, one stacked above the other, written with the same pen, the same hand. Whoever they were, they'd signed together. They'd stood there, shoulder to shoulder, buying supplies days after the couple vanished. 2 men, 1 plan, and a secret they thought would stay buried. Marley snapped a photo of the page, heart pounding. Outside, the wind creaked through the tin roof. A shiver crawled across her spine. This wasn't just about a lost couple anymore. It was about intent. It was about execution. It was about 2 people who knew exactly what they were doing. She drove straight to the county archives. C. Rhodes. The name echoed in her mind like a warning. It hadn't appeared in any official document, any interview, any report. No trace in Tobin Maher's statement, no rental record. Just a forgotten scribble in a dust-covered ledger. She ran the name through the department database. Nothing. No one named Rhodes fitting the initials in the state of Maine. But when she cross-checked it against personnel files from an old correctional facility 2 towns over, something emerged. An intake counselor, hired 1989, terminated mid-1992, just weeks before the Whitmers vanished. Clayton Rhodes. There was no photo, just a terse resignation letter and a scribbled personnel note. Boundary issues with juvenile detainees. Termination mutual. Advised not to rehire. Marley sat in silence. She knew what that meant. Departments used language like that when they didn't want the full truth on paper, when it was easier to bury than to confront. Back at her station, she pulled the evidence photo from the wall. This time, she ignored Daniel and Paige. Her eyes focused on the dark figure behind them, the face in the shadows, the jawline, the closely cropped hair. She enhanced the contrast, dropped the exposure, ran edge sharpening, still grainy, still incomplete. But the expression in those eyes, it wasn't shock, it wasn't fear, it was control, cold and deliberate, like he already knew how that evening would end. She printed the image, cropped the shadowed face, marked it with a question mark. By nightfall, she had a name. Clayton Rhodes, 59 years old. Last known address, Freeport, Maine. His employment history read like a warning label: youth camps, hospitals, a brief stint as a juvenile detention supervisor. No arrests, no charges. Just a trail of warnings, suspensions, and polite removals. The pattern was chilling. Every 2 years he moved, like clockwork. When she called the last landlord listed on file, the name Rhodes sparked no recognition. But a tenant remembered. First floor, quiet, soft-spoken. Drove a blue Suburban with no plates. "Creep me out," the woman said. There was no vehicle registered under his name. No utility accounts. He had scrubbed his trail clean, except for one place, that old bait shack ledger. Marley dove into the Coastal Gazette archives, scouring issues from July 1992. Every mention of Devil's Elbow, every story about the Whitmers, the marina, the bait shack, and then she found it. July 18th, 1992. A grainy photo from the local paper, volunteers pulling the recovered boat ashore. Smiling faces, familiar names listed beneath the caption. But in the background, arms crossed, face neutral, stood a man in a maintenance uniform, unnamed, unmentioned. She zoomed in. The jaw, the posture, the eyes. It was him. He had been there the whole time, watching. She layered the grainy newspaper photo from the archives over the shadowed frame from the recovered skiff image. Same jawline, same watchful eyes. It was him, Clayton Rhodes. He hadn't just known about the Whitmers. He had been there, standing at the edge of the crowd, watching the boat come home, watching the story fold neatly into myth. Marley's stomach churned. She knew, without any more doubt, what this case had become. This wasn't a lover's lost at sea accident. It wasn't misadventure. It was a plan, calculated, cold, executed by 2 men who had chosen their victims for reasons only they understood. Maybe for their beauty, their innocence, their quiet love. Daniel and Paige had been perfect in their predictability, in their belief that the world was good, and that belief had lured them into a trap dressed like a honeymoon. And whatever happened on that skiff, whatever was done to them, had been filmed. Because you don't pack 2 cameras, one found in a diver's pouch, the other never recovered, unless you intend to document, to replay, to remember. Back in her dark office, Marley sat surrounded by files scattered across the floor like bones. She stared into the photo of Paige laughing, of Daniel, squinting into the fading light. The third face hidden in the dark. She whispered into the silence, "You weren't supposed to come back." But the camera had, and the truth was surfacing. 32 years too late, but not too late to catch them. Not yet. The evidence room was cold, lit by a single flickering bulb. Marley stood before the shelves, her breath shallow, her gloves already pulled tight. The clerk had handed her the key personally. She confirmed the file number 3 times. 92-0712. The Whitmer file. What she didn't expect was the second box. Unlabeled, dusty, no barcode, no checkout sheet. Just a strip of masking tape across the top. One word, all caps, watch. She slid it out. It was lighter than she thought. Inside, beneath a single brittle sheet of brown packing paper, was a VHS tape in a plastic shell. No title, no markings. Just black plastic and a faint thumbprint smeared across the top. Someone had wanted it found. But not too soon. She took it to the viewing room, locked the door, and pushed the tape into the ancient VCR unit. Static filled the screen. Then, color, motion, a timestamp, July 12, 1992, 6:32 p.m. The image was shaky, pointed down toward the aluminum floor. A glimpse of a cooler. Paige's sandal. Then the lens tilted. Daniel laughed. Paige's voice murmured something about the tide. They were radiant, sun-soaked, unaware. But the camera wasn't in their hands. It was across from them, held low, angled just upward, filming without their knowledge. Paige leaned in, brushed something from Daniel's cheek, smiled. The camera zoomed. Then, glitch. The screen twisted in digital static. When the image returned, they were gone. The boat sat still, empty. For 30 seconds only the water moved. Then, voices, male, calm. Ready? Another voice, deeper, closer to the mic. She's still warm. Marley felt her throat close. The camera shifted. Someone's legs entered the frame, wet jeans, bare feet. A hand reached down, a flash of hair, dark, matted. Paige. The camera moved again. Closer. A body lifted, arms limp, her shirt torn. Her head rolled to the side, unresisting. The man behind the camera stepped in, framing the scene. It was brief. Then the screen glitched again, cut to black. Marley didn't breathe. Her hand hovered over the pause button, frozen. The rumors had always been there. A missing camera, whispers of a recording. But no one had ever seen it. Until now. She ejected the tape, sealed it in an evidence bag, her fingers shaking. It wasn't part of the original file. No one had logged it, which meant someone, inside the department, had kept it buried. She opened the chain of custody log. The last name listed, Deputy Clay Marin. March 1993, 6 months before his early retirement. Marley remembered the name, barely, the whispers, that he'd moved out west, cut ties, said he didn't trust anyone anymore. At the time, it had sounded like burnout. Now, it felt like guilt. She scanned the freeze frame and sent it to Nicole Herron in forensics. Message. Need ID match. Male subject. Time code 1807. Possible Clayton Roads. Cross-check with bait shack photo. She stared at the still image. Paige's face turned slightly toward the lens. Eyes closed. Jaw slack. A peace that wasn't peaceful. A silence that wasn't sleep. She hadn't drowned. She had been taken, used, filmed, and if this tape existed, others might too. Back at the board, Marley took a black marker and wrote one line beneath the timeline, "Find the second tape." Because there is always a second tape. People like Rhodes didn't stop at one, and they never worked alone. Marley didn't sleep that night. She watched the ceiling fan spin shadows until dawn filtered through the blinds. Paige's limp form etched behind her eyes. That voice, "She's still warm." That tape slot clicking closed. That word, "Watch." At 7:30 a.m., she sat parked outside Finch Hollow Storage, a low-slung, rust-bitten facility off Route 17. The chain-link gate buzzed when it opened. Half the units hadn't been touched in decades. She'd traced it back through a single unpaid utility bill. An alias, Charles Delaney. Rhodes' last known apartment. A storage unit billed monthly for $43.12. No forwarding address, no cancellation, just silence. Unit 117. She flashed her badge at the sleepy-eyed manager behind bulletproof glass. "Law enforcement, Knox County. I need access to a delinquent unit. Charles Delaney." The man scratched his stubble, pulled up the log. "Unpaid since '96. We never auctioned it. Rats probably made a home by now. Still need it open." He sighed, grabbed a ring of keys, led her down a crumbling row. Unit 117. The padlock groaned. The door rolled upward. The smell hit first: mildew, old paper, metal. Inside, 6 plastic bins, a moldy black duffel, a steamer trunk, no furniture, just darkness meant to be forgotten. She opened the first bin. Books, technical manuals, plumbing, carpentry, notes in tight clinical handwriting. Second bin. Blank VHS tapes, dozens, still sleeved, unlabeled, innocuous. Third bin, clothes, too small, girls' shirts, pajamas, cartoon print swimsuits, all carefully folded. Marley closed the lid gently. She turned to the trunk. The hinges protested, then gave. Inside, file folders, stacks of them, names, dates, locations, pages scrawled in obsessive ink. She picked up the first file and read. Subject: P.W. Date: July 12, 1992. Initial intake: 6:47 p.m. Response to sedation: compliant, disassociated, no struggle. Second session scheduled July 14th. Cancelled due to contamination risk. Recording archived. PR number 11, PR number 12, PR number 13. Marley's hands began to shake. P.W. Paige Whitmer, PR Princess Room. The same phrase etched into her memory from the tape. The same title from the anonymous evidence drop that had haunted her dreams. She flipped to another folder. New names: AMLS, CG. Each came with diagrams, psychological observations, video logs, detailed notes written in cold, detached language. Marley's heart sank. These weren't just victims. They were subjects, categorized, documented, dehumanized. She turned to the final bin. A red sticker marked the lid. Duplicates. Inside were tapes, hundreds of them, each labeled, each meticulously arranged. She ran her fingers along the spines. PR number 1, PR number 2, PR number 3, PR number 157. Then she saw it. PR number 11. The tape listed in Paige's file. She hesitated. Her hands trembled. But she had to see it. Back at the sheriff's office, in the privacy of the evidence viewing room, Marley slid the tape into the player. The screen buzzed, flickered, then stabilized. The image was clearer than the first tape. Paige sat on a pink bed, legs crossed, barefoot. She wore the same tank top from the photo. Her expression was vacant, sedated. Her eyes half-lidded, her mouth slightly open. She was there, but not. The camera zoomed in. A voice, calm and coaxing. "Good girl." Just like that. Daddy's proud. Then, "Clay, bring the lights in." Another man stepped into frame, thin, tall, graying at the temples. Clayton Rhodes. And just behind him, barely visible, stood a second figure. Blonde, younger, jittery, Matthew Tenko. Marley slammed pause. She sat motionless, her pulse hammering in her ears. They hadn't just taken Daniel and Paige. They had documented it, cataloged it, repeated it. There were over 100 tapes in that one bin. How many folders? How many names would never appear on any official list because no one had ever known they were missing? The question was too large to hold. Marley bagged PR number 11, labeled it, and carried it directly to her captain's office. Her voice was hoarse when she spoke. "This case," she said, "just became federal." Because this wasn't a cold case. It was a pattern, a system, something monstrous hiding in plain sight. The federal response arrived before dawn. 2 unmarked SUVs, a rapid response exploitation task force from Boston, 3 agents, 1 forensic caseworker. All of them moved like they had seen horrors before. Marley briefed them quickly. Dozens of labeled VHS tapes, dates, codes, probable victims. 2 confirmed suspects, Rhodes and Tenko. 1 missing. one presumed dead. The agents didn't blink. Agent Kravitz, a pale woman with hollow eyes and a voice that never changed pitch, asked for a viewing room. Marley gave her one and locked the door behind her. She didn't stay. Instead, Marley buried herself in the paper trail, cross-referencing every folder with missing person reports from 1987 to 1995. Some names matched, most didn't. But one location kept appearing, twice, in session files PR-24 and PR-36, Half-Bridge Lake, a remote patch of water 40 minutes inland. She searched county records, a cabin registered under a defunct LLC, no images, no surveillance, a maintenance record from 1991, plumbing, generator, signed by Tenko. It was still there. Marley didn't wait. The road to Half-Bridge Lake was more path than road, muddy from recent rain, climbing through pine-stained fog. Her cruiser fishtailed at the summit. The cabin stood about 100 yards from the lake, weathered, gray siding, a porch threatening collapse, ivy creeping up its flanks, but it was whole, untouched, preserved by isolation. She drew her flashlight and stepped forward. The front door opened with a low moan. No lock. Inside, it smelled of mildew and old wool. No furniture, just a folding chair. A milk crate. A wire ran along the wall to a dead security camera. She stepped carefully through the warped floor. A room on the left held a mattress, a pink blanket, a child's rabbit-shaped nightlight. She knelt beside the mattress, smudges on the inside of the boarded window, tiny handprints. Dust hung heavy in the corners. Tally marks covered the wall, hundreds etched deep into the wood, too many for days, years. In the hallway, a narrow closet. On a high shelf, a box sealed with duct tape. It rattled. She slid it open with her knife. Inside, tapes, dozens, labels in familiar handwriting, names, ages, a small stack of Polaroids, some dark, some disturbingly clear. A girl, maybe 6, holding a chalkboard. The date, August 14th, 1992, the day the skiff was found. Marley grabbed the edge of the shelf to stay upright. Paige hadn't died that night. She had been here, kept here, and maybe Daniel had too. But his name wasn't on any folder. No initials, no evidence he'd been in that cabin. The air felt wrong, not cold, but empty, as if something had lived here and left something behind. She called it in. 20 minutes later, cruisers and a federal SUV pulled in. Forensics swarmed the cabin. Marley stood in the trees, listening to the wind drag its fingers through the pine boughs. Half-Bridge Lake lapped gently at the shore. She could almost hear oars cutting water, almost see the skiff drift toward them. But it wasn't Daniel and Paige anymore. It was them. Roads, Tenko, ritual, silence, 32 years of it. An agent emerged from the cabin. In her gloved hands, a small object wrapped in tissue. A ring, simple, white gold, an inscription inside, "To P forever." Marley took it in both hands. Daniel hadn't abandoned her. He had left a marker, a promise. We were here. We didn't go quietly, and now the world would know. Later, a package arrived from forensics. A flash drive, audio extract, PR-12. She plugged it in, slid on her headphones. No music, no white noise, just a man's voice, measured, calm, Clayton Rhodes. "Is the light too bright, sweetheart?" A girl's voice answered, young, sleepy, trusting. He asked her to lie down, said the game wouldn't take long. His tone didn't change, even when she started crying. Marley stopped the tape. She sat in silence and wept. The ring from the cabin sat sealed in an evidence bag on Marley's desk. White, gold, delicate, almost too thin for time to have spared it. And inside, the inscription, "To P forever, D. She stared at it for a long while, longer than she meant to. Agent Kravitz had confirmed trace blood inside the setting, degraded but male. They couldn't match it yet, but Marley already knew. If Daniel had been in that cabin, the odds were slim he'd ever left it. Still, she wouldn't let herself believe it. Not fully, but the truth now unraveled in both directions, past and present, and neither led anywhere survivable. She reopened the Rhodes file again. Still nothing substantial. No digital trail, no relatives, no confirmed death. Just a ghost moving through decades of P.O. boxes, cash transactions, abandoned cars. She widened the scope. She searched every juvenile worker registry from 1985 to 2005. Any match for Rhodes, or for that Suburban. And then, finally, a hit. Not on Rhodes, on the vehicle. A dark blue Suburban impounded in 2001, northern Vermont, abandoned outside a farmhouse after a welfare call. The man inside, dead from an overdose, wasn't Rhodes. Younger, unknown, no ID. But in the barn, investigators had found something else, a padlocked freezer. Inside, VHS tapes, labeled the same way, PR number 188, PR 189, PR 190. They had never made the news. Quietly sealed, redirected to federal archives, classified under a program name Marley had never heard before, Family Sanctum Fellowship. She picked up the phone and called Agent Kravitz. "He's not the only one," Marley said, "and I think he gave it a name." Kravitz paused, then said, "We know. It was a network. Small, closed, rotating safe houses, shared materials. Rhodes may have been the founder, but he wasn't alone." Marley nodded slowly. "I found the cabin, the ring. Paige was there. Daniel might have been too. We think there are dozens," Kravitz said. "Hundreds, maybe. We don't know yet." Marley's voice cracked. "Did you watch PR number 13? "You need to," Kravitz said. She did. She entered the secure viewing room, inserted the tape. This one opened in blackness, waves lapping, the metallic squeak of warped oarlocks. The camera adjusted. They were on the skiff. Daniel was alive, barely. Tied to the boat's frame, wrists red and swollen, head bowed, chest heaving with each shallow breath. A voice behind the camera, Tenko, anxious. "Do we keep him or finish it?" Rhodes replied, cool, clinical. "Too strong. She's the focus. He was just context." Then Daniel's voice, hoarse. "You'll burn for this." The camera turned, caught Paige's face for a moment. Split lip, eyes alive, locked onto the lens, then static. Marley pressed pause. She stared. Paige had looked into that camera not like a victim, like a witness, like she knew someday someone might see it. She bagged the tape, marched to the task force command center. "I want to go public," she said. "Photo, ring, Paige's image, all of it." "You sure?" Kravitz asked. Marley didn't hesitate. "We start with the names, Clayton Rhodes, Matthew Tenko." Because this wasn't folklore. It was a crime scene with breath still on it. And someone was still watching. She felt it before she knew it. A man, middle-aged, khaki jacket, thinning hair, always across the street, never smoking, never speaking, just watching the station door, always gone before backup arrived. Facial recognition got nothing, no DMV hit, no ID. Until the slip. A red light camera caught a U-turn on Water Street. The plate traced to a Suburban rented from Bangor. Fake ID, prepaid debit card. Rental date, July 21st. 2 days after the case reopened. That night, Marley returned to the evidence vault. It was past midnight. She shouldn't have been there. She heard it. A door, quiet. Back entrance. She drew her weapon, moved silently past the archive shelves. And there he was, khaki jacket. Standing in front of the shelf marked PRTAPES. He didn't flinch. "You're too late," he said. "Down, now," Marley barked. He didn't move. "They're not all dead," he said. "Some were kept, protected. Paige." She understood. Marley fired once, into the floor. He dropped to his knees. She cuffed him. Called it in. He said nothing else. At booking, no ID, no resistance. But the fingerprint scan came back in seconds. Matthew Tenko, alive after 32 years. He didn't ask for a lawyer, didn't eat, just stared into the mirror. Marley entered the interview room. "You know why you're here," he smiled. "I was never really gone." "Where's Rhodes?" His eyes dimmed. "Dead. Years ago, but he left things. I kept them." "Where's Daniel Whitmer?" "Gone." Marley slid the photo across the table. "Paige," looking into the lens. Tenko touched it with trembling fingers. "She wasn't supposed to be in the tapes," he whispered. "She was for Rhodes. She was beautiful." Marley's voice was a blade. "She was human. We're going to bury you under the prison." Tenko didn't flinch. His mouth twitched. Almost a smile. That night, Marley sat alone. Played PR-13 again. Watched Paige look into the lens. "I see you," she whispered, and meant it. 2 days later, diver Nathan Bell, just a local ex-Coast Guard, made a discovery. Devil's Elbow, South Inlet. A sonar ping, 16 feet below, a second boat, not the skiff, a dinghy, flat-bottomed, untouched by time. He dove with a GoPro, sent the footage. Marley watched the video, heart hammering, cracked fiberglass, rope netting, a waterproof duffel bag wedged beneath a bench. Inside, clothing, and something else. The ring from the cabin sat sealed in an evidence bag on Marley's desk. White gold, delicate, almost too thin for time to have spared it. And inside, the inscription, "To P Forever." D.She stared at it for a long while, longer than she meant to. Agent Kravitz had confirmed trace blood inside the setting, degraded but male. They couldn't match it yet, but Marley already knew. If Daniel had been in that cabin, the odds were slim he'd ever left it. Still, she wouldn't let herself believe it. Not fully, but the truth now unraveled in both directions, past and present, and neither led anywhere survivable. She reopened the Rhodes file again. Still nothing substantial. No digital trail, no relatives, no confirmed death. Just a ghost moving through decades of P.O. boxes, cash transactions, abandoned cars. She widened the scope. She searched every juvenile worker registry from 1985 to 2005, any match for Rhodes, or for that Suburban. And then, finally, a hit. Not on Rhodes, on the vehicle. A dark blue Suburban impounded in 2001, northern Vermont. Abandoned outside a farmhouse after a welfare call. The man inside, dead from an overdose. Wasn't Rhodes. Younger, unknown, no ID. But in the barn, investigators had found something else. A padlocked freezer. Inside, VHS tapes, labeled the same way, PR number 188, PR 189, PR 190. They had never made the news. Quietly sealed, redirected to federal archives, classified under a program name Marley had never heard before. Family Sanctum Fellowship. She picked up the phone and called Agent Kravitz. "He's not the only one," Marley said. "And I think he gave it a name." Kravitz paused, then said, "We know." It was a network. Small, closed, rotating safe houses, shared materials. Rhodes may have been the founder, but he wasn't alone. Marley nodded slowly. "I found the cabin, the ring. Paige was there. Daniel might have been too." "We think there are dozens," Kravitz said. "Hundreds, maybe. We don't know yet." Marley's voice cracked. "Did you watch PR number 13? "You need to," Kravitz said. She did. She entered the secure viewing room, inserted the tape. This one opened in blackness, waves lapping, the metallic squeak of warped oarlocks. The camera adjusted. They were on the skiff. Daniel was alive, barely, tied to the boat's frame, wrists red and swollen, head bowed, chest heaving with each shallow breath. A voice behind the camera, Tenko, anxious. "Do we keep him or finish it?" Rhodes replied, cool, clinical. "Too strong. She's the focus. He was just context." Then Daniel's voice, hoarse. "You'll burn for this." The camera turned, caught Paige's face for a moment, split lip, eyes alive, locked onto the lens, then static. Marley pressed pause. She stared. Paige had looked into that camera not like a victim, like a witness, like she knew someday someone might see it. She bagged the tape, marched to the task force command center. "I want to go public," she said. "Photo, ring, Paige's image, all of it." "You sure?" Kravitz asked. Marley didn't hesitate. "We start with the names. Clayton Rhodes, Matthew Tenko." Because this wasn't folklore. It was a crime scene with breath still on it, and someone was still watching. She felt it before she knew it. A man, middle-aged, khaki jacket, thinning hair, always across the street, never smoking, never speaking, just watching the station door, always gone before backup arrived. Facial recognition got nothing, no DMV hit, no ID, until the slip. A red light camera caught a U-turn on Water Street. The plate traced to a Suburban rented from Bangor. Fake ID, prepaid debit card. Rental date, July 21st, 2 days after the case reopened. That night, Marley returned to the evidence vault. It was past midnight. She shouldn't have been there. She heard it. A door. Quiet. Back entrance. She drew her weapon, moved silently past the archive shelves, and there he was. Khaki jacket, standing in front of the shelf marked PRTAPES. He didn't flinch. "You're too late," he said. "Down, now," Marley barked. He didn't move. "They're not all dead," he said. "Some were kept, protected. Paige, she understood." Marley fired once, into the floor. He dropped to his knees. She cuffed him, called it in. He said nothing else. At booking, no ID, no resistance. But the fingerprint scan came back in seconds. Matthew Tenko, alive. After 32 years, he didn't ask for a lawyer, didn't eat, just stared into the mirror. Marley entered the interview room. "You know why you're here," he smiled. "I was never really gone." "Where's Rhodes?" His eyes dimmed. "Dead. Years ago. But he left things. I kept them." "Where's Daniel Whitmer?" "Gone." Marley slid the photo across the table. Paige, looking into the lens. Tenko touched it with trembling fingers. "She wasn't supposed to be in the tapes," he whispered. "She was for Rhodes. She was beautiful." Marley's voice was a blade. "She was human. We're going to bury you under the prison." Tenko didn't flinch. His mouth twitched. Almost a smile. That night, Marley sat alone, played PR-13 again, watched Paige look into the lens. "I see you," she whispered, and meant it. 2 days later, diver Nathan Bell, just a local ex-Coast Guard, made a discovery. Devil's Elbow, South Inlet, a sonar ping, 16 feet below, a second boat. Not the skiff, a dinghy, flat-bottomed, untouched by time. He dove with a GoPro, sent the footage. Marley watched the video, heart hammering, cracked fiberglass, rope netting, a waterproof duffel bag wedged beneath a bench. Inside, clothing. A man's shirt, soaked but still patterned in faded plaid. A single shoe, a belt, and inside a zippered pocket, leather worn but intact. Daniel Whitmer's wallet, his license still dry. The photo, sunlit, 25, smiling. There was no blood, no signs of damage, but the fiberglass showed scratches, deep, desperate, like someone tried to claw free. At the bottom of the bag, another item, a microcassette, labeled, "For whoever finds me." D.W. Marley didn't wait, called Kravitz. The lab digitized the audio, then she listened. Daniel's voice, calm, steady. "This is Daniel Whitmer. If you're hearing this, I'm probably gone. They took us, 2 men. They said it was a mistake, but they didn't let us go. Paige was first. I tried to fight. They drugged me, made me watch, then said it was my turn." A pause, breathing. "I got a key off one of them. Tenko, he was sloppy. I got out, but not far. They caught me near the shore, beat me. Rhodes just watched. I think they meant to kill me, bury the boat. But the storm came. Something went wrong. Another pause. A whisper. If this tape survives, tell her family she didn't give up. Paige fought, and if they say she ran, or fell, or vanished, they're lying. One final sentence. Please, burn it all. Then silence. Marley sat for a long time, then made 5 copies, locked the original in the vault. That night, she stood at Devil's Elbow, lit the bait shack ledger, watched the ink curl. Not justice yet, but the beginning of it. And the first thing to burn was the lie.